ICQ Podcast episode 343, QSO Today Expo. Well, hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 343rd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Sid Boyce, Golf 3, Victor Bravo Victor, Andrew Wybrell, Mike 0, India Romeo Uniform, Stuart Dixon, Mike 7, Bravo Hotel Tango, and our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Dan, KB6, November Uniform, and Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief. And this episode's feature is Martin and I talking to Eric from the QSO Show in relation to the upcoming QSO Expo. Well, as always, it's your very kind generosity that keeps the ICQ podcast advert free. And we'd like to thank the following listeners for setting up subscription donations to help us pay our way and keep advert free and showing the value they find in the show. So Stuart Dixon, Mike 7, Bravo Hotel Tango, says, hi guys, thanks for the great podcast. He's working his way through the back catalogue at the moment, and he's set up a monthly subscription donor. He's got a question for Martin that we'll cover at the end of the show in the feedback section. So I say listen to what Martin thinks of the FT70D. Our next donor is Sid Boyce, Golf 3, Victor Bravo Victor, and Sid lets us know that he's not only into the ICQ podcast, but he loves his SDR gear, and as I say, also likes to do some home brewing as well. So as I say, great to have you on board, Sid, as a donor to the ICQ podcast, and thank you very much for setting up your donation. Our third donor is Andrew Wybrell, Mike 0, India Romeo Uniform. And again, we'd like to thank all those guys, as I say, for showing their value in the show and helping us out to keep the show advert free. If you find value in what we do, the best way you can show that value is by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. And as I think about the value you get in the show, maybe the price of a cup of coffee or a lunch, etc., or those days when we could have lunch out and about with the COVID, and to say set up a subscription or a one-off donation, and I say you'd be greatly appreciated in helping us out. Right, let's continue on with the show now, and we're going to join Martin, Dan and Edmund as they discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including FCC usage reminder and Japan looking to increase UFO operations. As always, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 343 of the ICQ Podcast. And this week's news roundtable for that episode. Unfortunately, we're a bit short on the ground today, but that still isn't going to stop us from having a good natter. Tonight, I have Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, guys.
Hiya. And I also have Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello there, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Right, hi. Now, I've heard from Ruth, who said she's doing college work, so she can't make it. Leslie seems to have either fallen asleep or his shift patterns have changed, but he hasn't come back to me, and I haven't heard from Matthew, so I'm going to probably get some very panicky phone calls tomorrow morning saying, I missed it, and yes, sorry you did. But I'm sure we'll have some fun tonight and discuss some good stuff. First news story, FCC issues enforcement advisory. Radio users reminded not to use radio in crimes. Dan, your side of the pond, you had some trouble earlier in the month and weren't people using radio?
Well, yeah, so this was a response by the FCC to some possibly illegal use of radio in the protests in Washington, D.C. earlier this month. And I mean, it kind of had a laugh because, I mean, really, the thrust of this says, don't do illegal things with your radio. Well, of course, in the amateur radio, we know that, if you do illegal things, that's illegal, right?
Yeah, it was stating the obvious, wasn't it, Dan?
And course, it's sort of. It says here specifically, the Bureau reminds amateur licensees that they are prohibited from transmitting communications intended to facilitate a criminal act. So a lot of amateur radio operators got a little bit excited about it. But to be fair, it also called out the other users of personal radio services like Citizens Band and Family Radio. So we weren't being targeted specifically by this enforcement advisory.
Yeah, it's a bit of a catch-all for everybody, isn't it? But in fairness, if you are a criminal mind, why would you bother with a license? Why would you not just use whatever you can get your hands on? Because if you're doing a criminal act, probably the least criminal thing you're doing is using illegal frequencies on the air.
Right. Well, right. That's the whole kind of funny thing about this.
Yeah, well, I think it's a bit strange. Edmund, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, when I first heard about this, my first two reactions were, really? You don't say? And my second reaction was, if I were living in the States and under the jurisdiction of the FCC and a member of the ARRL, I might feel a teeny bit offended or take umbrage at the idea that I might genuinely need somebody to spell out for me that doing illegal things with radios was illegal. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and by doing this, by putting these notices out there, the worst that will happen is that there will be a little bit of noise in the short term from some vaguely insulted people, but not much else. If the FCC and the ARRL had kept quiet and somebody or an organisation further down the line had pointed the finger at them and said, you could have said something at the time but you chose not to, then that person potentially could criticise them. By putting these notices, these self-evidently blindingly obvious notices out there, at least the FCC and the ARRL can say, well, we tried, we did something, as opposed to doing nothing. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty ineffectual, because the people who will have read these notices and taken them on board are probably the very people who didn't need to be told, and the people who did need to be told probably either didn't see the notices at all or saw them and then completely ignored them. I would be absolutely amazed if even one single person who was contemplating using 2 meters to arrange or participate in illegal activity or rioting read these notices and as a direct consequence thought to themselves, oh yeah, they've got a good point. Oh, all right, I won't do that then. I'll be a good law-abiding citizen instead. But I've read so much about this on so many websites, I've rather lost track of what I saw or read where. But I did see somewhere a suggestion that one of the amateur repeaters in the Washington area was being used or to carry, or misused, abused, to carry messages to do with criminal acts and rioting, as a result of which it was switched off, hopefully pretty quickly. I would hope that if that is an accurate report, then just because an amateur radio repeater happens to be relaying communications neither proves nor guarantees that those communications come from amateurs, which I sincerely hope would be the case. And there was also a photograph I saw somewhere of what purported to be a rioter wearing what looked like a cheap programmable handheld of the Baofeng / Wushan variety. So perhaps when these notices were put together, they were written with that kind of programmable, wide-banded radio in mind. But to sum up, the best kept secrets are the ones with the fewest people in them, as my dad used to say. So if I was going to do rioting or crime, I certainly wouldn't do it on an amateur band, and if I was stupid enough to do it on an amateur band, I certainly wouldn't give my call sign. So these notices are basically preaching to the converted, but by putting them out there, the FCC and ARRL aren't doing any harm as such, and they are potentially protecting themselves against future finger-pointing and accusations of inaction. But basically it's a storm in a teacup. Back to you, Martin.
Good points, good points. And Dan, I suppose, let's face it, anything that goes out over the air can be unencrypted, even if it's, well, it'll go out in clear voice, I would suggest, unless anybody works out there's encryption. And most of the cheaper radios, I'm sure the encryption's not that clever in it that the government forces would be able to break it pretty much immediately, wouldn't you think?
Well, yeah. So they would have to get, like you say, kind of the more sophisticated about it. They would have to first off get like a DMR radio, and then pass the encryption keys around. But yeah, I don't know. That I guess that's a I don't know how sophisticated these guys are nowadays. But having said that, too, you'd think that they would have, if they were sophisticated at all, they would avoid the amateur bands, just because there's that many more people listening to them, right? So if they, what do amateurs tend to do? Well, if they hear bad things happening on their frequencies, they record it, and you wouldn't want those recordings, right? I mean, if you were perpetrating crimes.
Well, I think what both you and Edmund have said is that these people obviously aren't amateurs by any stretch of the imagination. They're not aware of what actually goes on in RF, and anything that's transmitted could be heard by anybody. And, I don't think they're clever enough at this point in time to make it difficult for the authorities to work out who they are. So long may that remain so. And as per shutting off an amateur repeater, yeah, the repeater keeper has to shut it down in the UK, certainly, if there's abuse going through it. But the thing with any repeater, and I would assume exactly the same in the States, the input and output and the tones are, if you transmit in, it'll come out. Now, I know that there are lockdown repeaters in the States, but they're normally, from what I've heard, you're told to get off them, but they're still open for you to transmit into them before you're told to get off them. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I guess if I were a repeater operator whose repeater covered the capital area in this case, I probably would just shut it off as a matter of course.
Yeah, makes sense.
Why create any kind of trouble for yourself? Just shut it off, and when the thing blows over, turn it back on.
Yeah, certainly makes sense. And us amateurs would rather it turned off for a few hours or a couple of days rather than it being turned off permanently because of abuse.
Yep.
Moving on, the next news story is kind of a continuation from this. It's the ARRL produced a Purpose of Amateur Radio, which kind of follows on, just reinforcing what amateur radio is all about. And it is talking about public service and the training of radio for people to understand the technology and helping out and all those sort of things, and goodwill along those lines, isn't it, Dan?
Right. So this statement was published by the ARRL right after the FCC published their enforcement advisory, and its purpose is to maybe counteract any misinterpretation of the enforcement advisory. Because the FCC is coming out and saying, hey, people can use amateur radio for bad things, and so the ARRL, rightly enough, came back and said, look, that's not what we're all about. What we're all about is, innovation and public service, and that's it can be misused, but that's not what we're all about.
That's certainly the case. And, the amateur radio's got a lot of good things about it, which is highlighted in here. As I said earlier, it has a long history. It's a service to the public, and it saves lives. It's an educational medium, both for adults and even school children. There's so much, and international goodwill, the whole thing. There's just so much in it. What's your thoughts, Edmund?
Yes, I never really thought of myself as being an ambassador of international goodwill. That's quite a nice thought, Martin. I hope I do a reasonable job most of the time. I suppose amateur radio is unique amongst hobbies that in that its weakness can also be its strength. The weakness is that people who are intent on causing mischief and passing themselves off potentially as radio amateurs when they're not, it's quite easy to do, as may have happened in Washington DC. But the fact that it is an open hobby that potentially any person can join, subject to sitting and passing the exams, of course, is also its strength, and the diversity of what you can do once you're in the hobby is another one of its strengths. So obviously I'm not a member of the ARRL, so I'm disinterested. I live in the wrong country as well, although I know I could join from overseas. But in the context of what we were talking about before, I think it was a really good idea actually to put this communication out there. So I applaud them on this one.
Hey, I'll just throw one comment here, Edmund. I hope you'll think about that a little bit more. In the Part 97, which are the rules that govern amateur radio here in the U.S., the very first part is the 5 purposes of amateur radio, and one of them, the final one, the 5th one, is the enhancement of international goodwill. So I hope you'll think about that, because I think it's really true. I think of the 5, that may be. Well, they're all important, but that certainly that's one that resonates with me.
It certainly does, because every time we have a contact with somebody in a different country to ourselves, we are ambassadors for our country and B, our hobby. And whether you're doing it on HF or VHF via a repeater
Satellite.
or a hotspot, satellite, it doesn't matter. If you are talking to somebody outside your own country, you are an ambassador for your country. The way you operate and the way you conduct yourself, it gives the other person at the other end the impression of your country. Yeah, and if you're rude and arrogant, and you shout at somebody who's new on the hobby and starting to learn, then you're spoiling it, and you're not the ambassador that people want. We all should be operating goodwill and helping each other, I would suggest.
Absolutely.
And I would add off the back of that if you are working somebody in a foreign country, even if you only know half a dozen words in their language, then use them. It doesn't matter if you have a go at speaking German or French or Spanish or whatever, and your efforts are the most shockingly bad thing that the person on the other end has ever heard in their life. It will take the QSO to a complete other dimension. And I've experienced this when I have called CQ in English on 40 metres, and a French station has come back to me and said a few words in English, which is natural enough because I'm located in England, so I suppose it's a logical thing to do. If I then go straight back to that person in French, yes, okay, I can speak French reasonably fluently, but even if I couldn't, if I stumbled my way through a couple of sentences even, you can hear it, the surprise, first of all, but the change in the tone of voice and how that person will suddenly quite often sound like they're really, really excited. It's hard to, if you've never actually heard it, it's hard to describe, but from experience, it makes such a difference. And I know there's this thing about, I might say the wrong thing or make myself sound stupid or whatever, or get it wrong and how terribly embarrassing that would be. It doesn't matter. Have a go and stuff it up to the extent that it's never been stuffed up before. That is still a lot better than just speaking your own language and expecting the other person to speak your language as well. So throw embarrassment aside and go for it, and the results can be phenomenal.
Yeah, well, just as a side, and this isn't amateur radio, but I'll throw this one in. Be humble. Last time I drove down to Friedrichshafen was about 3 or 4 years ago. And you have to drive right across France and then across Germany. Now, I probably don't speak any words of French. Probably only know about 3. Anyway, we arrived at a petrol station come service station. I filled the car up. I went in to pay. And there was a Brit in front of me being really arrogant and shouting at the woman as though she was stupid behind the till. And she was having none of it. She was, I speak English, blah, blah, blah. And they eventually, after a bit of argy-bargy, managed to do the transaction. He left. And I looked this lady straight in the face and said, I'm terribly sorry, I don't speak your language. And she said, that's not a problem, sir. How may I help you? So the thing is, as I say, a lot of it is the Brits abroad syndrome where, we think just shouting at people makes things happen. No, it doesn't. So anyway, that's my story. It's a true one. Either take it on board or not, but it certainly works for me. If you're polite to people, and even if they don't speak the language and you can't, the two of you being polite and sensible gestures will get things done. If you get irate and you scream and holler, people don't want to know. Right, let's move to the next news story. Edmund, I'm going to give you this one first, because Ed's going to be most upset because it's a German story and he ain't here tonight. But Germans dealt with 3,500 radio interference complaints in 2020. And as Dan was telling me at the start, when we were having our initial chat, that's almost 10 a day. That's a phenomenal amount of interference, isn't it, Edmund?
It is, and I'm wondering what their motive is, because I assume they're not going to all that effort and time and trouble and expense just for the good of the radio amateur community. So the only two things I can think of is if maybe they're doing it on safety grounds. So if they stop outside somebody's house and there's a huge amount of interference coming from inside, they perhaps look at it as a preventative measure by knocking on the door and saying to the owner, are you aware that, in case the thing that's causing the interference is power supply or something that is starting to fail and could thus present some kind of fire risk, maybe. Or alternatively, from the point of view of interference to other services. And I'm reminded of the story we had within the last couple of months of interference being caused, I think it was somewhere in Scotland, was it? On the airband frequencies, and it turned out to be some sort of imported from eBay non-compliant light bulbs. What's the name of those things? Not LEDs, but light bulbs that were designed to look sort of like old-fashioned style ones, but they weren't.
Compact fluorescence, maybe?
Yeah, but apart from that, I don't really know what to say other than if Germany can do it, why can't we?
Well, I hear you on that one, and but the problem is there's so many devices, electronic devices around, and you wonder, we covered a few episodes back, the Raspberry Pi 4 puts out a carrier on 125 megs, which is right in the middle of the aircraft band. in the car I'm driving at the moment, which is the device is permanently disconnected because Carol isn't in there, but she's got a phone charger, a drop-in phone charger, which is one of these ones which has, where you just lay the phone up against it and it charges. And that wipes out the 2 meter calling frequency. So if it's plugged in and I'm driving along and I switch to 2 meter calling frequency, I get this horrible hash. So there are so many devices out there that probably need looking at. What do you think, Dan?
I was trying to find, when I read that we were going to cover this, I was trying to find information about the FCC actions. And I haven't been able to find anything, but I mean, as we've talked about these items a lot, and it's getting to be more and more of a problem. I mean, with more electronic devices, we're going to have more problems. And man, at some point, I think the FCC here kind of just gives up. But I guess the Germans just take it a little bit more seriously than we do.
Yeah, I think they do. But the other thing is, I mean, okay, let's go back to the heyday of amateur radio, the 1940s, 50s, 60s, heydays, yeah? We didn't have half the electronic stuff we have now. And think about it. Every satellite dish has got an oscillator whistling away for its down converter. Everything that we have electronics has got an oscillator in it. Albeit very low level of radiation being put out, but everything's putting out radiation. Every superhet radio potentially can be transmitting at the same time. Very low, I know. And that was brought home to me, a few years ago when I was working nights, and for my aunt's funeral was the following day. So instead of going back onto days and then back onto nights in the middle of the week, I stayed up all night and went to the funeral in the morning. This was a few years ago. And I was looking at APRS and tracking things. And up till midnight, I was only tracking stuff locally. After midnight, the whole of Europe, I was getting, it was from relays, but I was getting information from miles away and stuff coming in. I could see stuff moving all over Europe. Now, I know it's going through various digi-repeaters, but pre-midnight, I couldn't hear a thing. And then at about 6 in the morning, when everybody starts getting up and putting their tellies on and all that sort of thing, suddenly it all dropped back to what it normally is throughout the day. So that was quite an interesting thing to actually physically see it actually happen. But there is so many devices, and I'm really pleased that the German authority at least admitting that they got a lot of problems they've got to solve. Let's move to the next news story. And the Japanese Amateur Radio League wants to increase youngsters' amateur radio experience opportunities. Dan, you were hoping this was what the ARL were going to do, isn't it?
Yeah, so I thought when, this was a thing here in the States a couple of years ago that, they were going to look at the technician class license and see how we could get more people in the ham radio. And after going through, a couple of years of committee work, what they decided to do was instead of sort of making it easier to get into ham radio, they're just going to give technician class licensees more privileges, which didn't seem like what they started out doing. But that's what this kind of looks like. It looks like they're going to try and figure out ways to get more kids into it through different means, and I think that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, because if you'd have spoke to me about 2 years ago and said, should we have an easy license? And it's been approached in the UK, and I'm sure it's been approached in the States. Should you have a license that's even easier, just an operator's license, a VHF operator's license, whatever? I would have said no. I would have said, you want to have a certain amount of satisfaction to pass your test. However, thinking about it a bit further now, the number of people that have in amateur radio have declined in Japan. I think it's gone down from well over 1.5 million about 10 years ago to a lot less now. I think it's about 700,000. They have a lot of things like natural disasters out there, like earthquakes and one thing and another. And having a spare set of communications, a way to communicate, to me, and for public service and, emergency service stuff, is important. But equally, radio is also a useful experience from a learning point of view. And it ought to be fun. I remember a few years ago, we did an event for a group of scouts and cubs. And we were asked to put an amateur radio station on. We did, but in fairness, what we actually did was gave them a lot of license-free handy talkies and lent them out on a half-hour basis. And now anybody within the local area who had these similar radios, which were license-free, probably couldn't use them for that day because the kids were screaming and hollering all over the band, all over the 8 channels there. However, at the end of it, about 3, maybe 4 of the youngsters came back and said, "Hey, mister, that big radio you got, can you tell me more about it?" And they were genuinely starting to ask questions. So make it fun and get in there. Edmund, have I gone on and spoiled your thunder on this one?
No, not at all, Martin. And I've had similar experiences down the years with about half a dozen PMR 446 radios. And I know what you mean about the channels being not usable because of the amount of screeching and yelling that was going on. But that's the advantage of half a watt ERP. Unless all this is going on top of a hill, you don't need to go very far away before the signals fade out and those channels become reusable. And interestingly enough, about 5 years ago, I was involved with several JOTA, Jamboree on the air stations, and several TDOTA, Thinking Day on the air stations, which is the Girl Guide equivalent of Jamboree on the air. And whilst you will always get children who are interested in what's going on, irrespective of whether they're boys or girls, broadly speaking, we tended to get more interest, more concentration, less messing about from the Girl Guides than we did from the Boy Scouts, which was very noticeable. So there's definitely enthusiasm there, despite us living in this age of smartphones and high technology and social media and internet. So yeah, and anything that anybody can do to encourage the youngsters is to be welcome. They are the future of our hobby overall, or after all, I should say. And regarding the decrease in amateurs in Japan, yes, it's a very big drop, but to paraphrase what I've said in previous podcasts, how worrying it is depends on how active the people are that you've lost. Personally, I would rather lose 100 amateurs from the hobby who hardly ever turn their radio on than 3 amateurs from the hobby who were really, really active and did loads of things. But that's all I can think of to say, Martin. Back to you.
Oh, I agree with you on the be active. And it's surprising. People say, there's no activity on VHF and UHF, or there's no activity on this. There certainly is if you call. And that's another way. Moving to our next news story. This is another one of those real feel-good stories. Sweden's oldest radio ham was on TV. And the gentleman, and I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, Tug Carlson, SM7ALI. Tug is 101. Now, I know that in the States you had a guy at 109, Dan, before he died recently. But 101's a good innings, isn't it?
Absolutely. I hope I live to be 101.
Well, Dan, if we both live to be 101, I think we'll be on episode about 600. So, oh dear, oh, you're going to have something to look forward to.
Well, well, okay. I don't know if I can take 35 more years.
Oh dear, yeah. What's it? Yeah, it would be about. Okay, you're younger than me, but it would be it'd be a 30 odd years for me. About 32. So yeah, 32, 33. Yeah, it's be interesting. But hey, we could sit there and be grumpy old men, Dan.
Okay.
The stereotype of the hobby. Hi. I don't think we ever will, Dan. Don't worry about it. Be grumpy old men, that is. So, Edmund, what do you think about this gentleman achieving what he's achieved?
Well, very many congratulations to him, and yet more proof, as if any were needed, that amateur radio is good for keeping your mind turning over and keeping you in your youth.
It certainly does. It keeps you young at heart, for certain. And there are people that, sometimes people say older people are not interested in new technology. And then suddenly you come across somebody who's doing something really clever and you think, God, that's clever, and they really on the button and they understand it to the nth degree. So this hobby does keep you young at heart. So a good one. So congratulations to Targ for being 101. Let's hope he lives many more years and enjoys his amateur radio. Last news story, and I thought this was interesting. I know that I've passed most of them to you first, Dan, because most of them have been American stories this time. But city antenna law upturned by FCC ruling, and it's talking about satellite dishes in Chicago, that they can now have them back on buildings. That's a big turnaround, isn't it?
Well, so I'm surprised they had this law in the first place, because I thought this kind of satellite dish antennas were allowed everywhere. But the thing that strikes me about this story is that it only applies to dish antennas, dish television antennas. It says here, does not apply to AM/FM radio, CB radio, or amateur radio. So what that says to me is the dish antennas guys have just got better lobbying than we do. I mean, seriously, it's really a political thing.
Yeah, well, I suppose if you're paying your shed and a half load of money every month to a satellite provider, that's big bucks to them, and they can afford to do the lobbying, can't they?
Yeah, I guess that's the story. But so that just says that it's another reason why we should all be thinking about the ARRL, because the ARRL, well, at least here in the U.S., obviously RSGB there. I mean, if you don't speak up, you don't get, and if you don't have an organization to speak up for you, then you're screwed, basically.
You certainly are. Well, before I mention a naughty way of getting a 2-meter antenna up in Chicago and any other part of the world, really, I'm going to pass this to Edmund. So round to you, Edmund.
Well, I suppose my mischievous side thinks that I could become active if I was living in Chicago and affected by this rule. I could become active on 10 gigahertz because the vast majority of direct-to-home broadcast signals from satellites worldwide takes place in the KU band between 10.75 and 12.75 gigahertz. So a dish that was suitable for receiving those kind of signals also ought to be okay on the 10 gigahertz band. If ordinary over-the-air TV antennas aren't banned, then you could perhaps get something up on the roof for 70 centimetres, 440 megahertz, because from the ground an amateur antenna for that band would be indistinguishable from a traditional over-the-air TV antenna. But I think probably as soon as somebody told me you can't have antennas, the first thing that would be going through my mind would be stealth mode, and I would be looking all around the property, dreaming up weird and wonderful ways that I could secrete an antenna, maybe a vertical for 20 metres and disguise it as a flagpole, that kind of thing. So I wouldn't take this. I wouldn't take this one lying down. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, right. Well, as I say, there's a big market in satellite TV. However, and Dan, thank you for posting in my list a quick and easy suggestion. What I was going to say is, guys, if you live in the Chicago area, you've been told you can't put an amateur radio dish up, aerial up. However, it is my belief that if you cut a slot in a satellite dish, you can then load that up on 2 meters. So a horizontal slot on an oval dish, and a horizontal slot could be loaded up for 2 meters. And horizontal slot is vertically polarized, which it got me at first, but it is actually vertically polarized. And certainly for 2 meters and 70 cents, you should be able to get out. And now that's a little bit naughty, but if the dish is up, nobody's going to see the slot cutting it from the ground, which means that you've got a 2 meter antenna up, boys. But am I being a bit of a rebel there, Dan?
Well, no, I think that you're being innovative, right?
I hope so, but yeah, but hope so. But I think the dish antenna, it certainly would get you one band. Well, there's no reason why it shouldn't get you 2 meters or 70 cents, depending on the slot you cut. So
right. In fact, I found another web page that shows you how to make it for both 2 meters and 70 centimeters.
All right. Well, I'll look at that later. I mean, I've never done it. Truthfully, never done it, but I knew of the technology, and it would have certainly been something I'd have been thinking about if I was told I couldn't put up an antenna because I lived in an HOA, for argument's sake. Because something up at gutter level with a slot in it, a board or something up, a bit of metal up at gutter level with a slot in it, nobody's going to spot what that is. So
and over here, these dish TV antennas can be had for just going. A lot of times people say, "Hey, you can have this if you come and take it off my house, or just come and pick it up."
Yeah.
So, yeah, it sounds like something worth experimenting with.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that hopefully people in Chicago will be happy with me. The FCC might not be, but maybe I'm a very naughty boy, but.
Well, it's an aesthetic thing, right? It's an aesthetic thing more than an interference kind of thing or something. So if the FCC says you can do it, well, you can do it.
Yeah, well, it's an antenna, isn't it? Yeah. So there you go. So
it just makes me laugh slightly that in theory you can't put up a little small 2 meter beam antenna to talk to somebody across the other side of town. But you could put up a socking great dish in your front garden to do moon bounce.
Well, they haven't said that, but yeah.
In theory.
Yeah.
I'm being mischievous.
Well, I think we all are. But that's what makes it fun. But I think, if you live in Chicago, and I know our friend Scott McDonald does, Scott, I'm sure would have got past this as a problem. But slot antennas could be an answer if you live in the Chicago area. Okay, that concludes the news stories for this episode, and I think we've had some interesting discussion and a bit of a giggle along the way, even if Dan and I are worried about doing our 101st year episode, but we're okay. Right, let's find out what the boys have been up to since the last one. Go on, Edmund, you go first on this one.
In terms of transmitting and working people, I've done next to nothing at all. Done a lot of listening, which is bad really, because I'm not a licensed listener. I'm supposed to transmit sometimes as well. The only other thing of note was that last weekend I saw online that there was going to be a Winter Ham Fest taking place in the USA, but not physically in person, so they were streaming it all online. And they had a series of talks throughout the day. Now, by coincidence, every topic was one that I was really interested in. It's on YouTube, the video of the whole thing. It's about 7 hours long if you watch it end to end, but they have time stamped it so you can pick out the talk that's of interest to you. So if you have a look on YouTube for Winterfest 2021 Amateur Radio, you should be able to find the video. And it was really, really good. I know that not everything will be to everybody's taste, but it just so happened that every single talk I was genuinely interested in. And the closing talk of the day featured Neil Rapp, who we met when we visited, the ICQ podcast visited Hamvention in 2019, and also Sterling Mann as well. And between them, they gave a very interesting talk about youth on the air. So we've mentioned youth in this episode, haven't we? So that talk is well worth hunting out, but they all are. So that would be my recommendation if you want a bit of lockdown viewing, perhaps. But other than that, I'm really struggling to think, apart from the odd QSO across town, using all my VHF, UHF antennas that are inside my attic. So that's another way you can get around it if you're in Chicago. Put all your antennas in your attic. Other than that, I can't really think of anything noteworthy worth mentioning that I've done since we spoke the last time, Martin. And even though, just going back to the attic, even though tiles on your roof will provide some attenuation, it's nowhere near as bad on 2 metres as it is on 70 centimetres. So if you've never tried a collinear inside your attic, yes, it's far from perfect, obviously. Outside would be much better. But equally, it might not be as terrible as you think it is. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and the attenuation changes with the tiles are wet and one thing and another, so that thing. I always used to put TV aerials in the loft going back years. Unfortunately, I've got a loft extension now, so I don't have a loft. But what I used to use as a cheap mast in the loft was I used to take a broom handle, drill a couple of holes in it, bolt it, screw it to one of the rafters, and then put the antenna on that. So that's a cheap and easy mast as well for anybody who's putting something up in the loft.
Well, funnily enough, Martin, you saying that, I am not a DIYer at all, and my skills with drilling holes in things are non-existent. As you might have gathered, I'm very much from the communication side of the hobby rather than the construction side, very much so. But the way my collinear is mounted, in the shed, I found an old but very clean and never used rake. And we've got lots of heavy boxes up in the attic, so I took the rake up there, sat it so that the handle was pointing vertically upwards, sat a really heavy box on top of the teeth. No, that's not the right word, is it? What's the name of the metal bits that stick out the bottom of a rake?
I think it's the head of the rake.
Yeah, so the box is sitting on the head, and the box has got some old junk in it that weighs quite a lot, and that means the handle is pointing straight upwards. The collinear is clamped to that, and the top of the collinear rests against the apex of the roof, and that has been in place for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years now. And even though there can be a little bit of draft going through the attic when it's very windy outside, because the whole thing isn't 100% airtight, that antenna has never fallen over, moved, or I've never had to do anything with it. And of course, because it's inside, the other advantage is it's not being ravaged by the great British weather, so I haven't had to contend with rainwater getting into the coax or anything like that. So it's not the same as what you said, Martin, but my main receive and transmit antenna, my 2 metre 70 centimetre collinear, is set up in a similar way to to your little technique that you mentioned there, Martin.
Yeah, okay, well, great minds think alike. Hi. Dan, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke to you?
Well, I tell you, following on the virtual show theme here, I attended the Contest University Propagation webinar, and that was pretty interesting. And only the first one I wasn't quite so interested in. There was, I think, 4 or 5 and different presentations. But they had all the big guys lined up. They had K9LA talk about the next sunspot cycle. They had WA3FET talk about the effect of hills and such on antenna patterns. W3LPL talked about, I forget off the top of my head what he talked about, but it was real interesting. And again, those presentations are all available on the Contest University website. And then coming up, I'm going to be presenting at the QSO Today Expo, so I've got to get my presentation together for that. So lots of virtual presentations going on.
Yeah, it certainly is. Eric Goof told me that from QSO Today, told me that you were presenting. He also told me Bengali are there, and I said, well, if you can't find Dan, he'll be on the Bengali booth.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't actually put your hands on a Bengali at the virtual booth, but it will be interesting to see what he's got.
Yeah, well, I think they will be showing virtually things, but you are going to be able to purchase. If somebody actually wants to purchase one, they will be able to do it there and then, I believe, from what Eric was telling us. But there's far more. We talked to Eric, Colin and I about this at the weekend, and the ICQ podcast will also be at that exhibition. We'll have a booth there and do things.
Well, that's right, and I've signed up for. Don't have a specific time, but I'm perfectly happy to do some booth duty, as they say.
We'd love to have you, Dan. You know that. All the presenters are welcome to help on this one. So, yes.
It'll be a lot of fun, I think.
I think so. And the thing I think which is the hardest thing so far has been we're in lockdown. We're able to talk to people. Great. But I think the biggest problem is that we haven't really got anything to look forward to. And what I mean by that is we're almost at the end of January. By now we'd be planning our holidays. We'd be maybe planning our trip out to Dayton or Friedrichshafen. We'd be planning, what we're going to do at Easter and all those sort of things. And we can't do that. And I think that's the thing that's maybe making everybody a bit miserable. But at least with these virtual expos, yeah, we can look forward to the virtual expo, and that's what I'm kind of looking forward to doing, that one.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, you've been busy as well, Dan. That's good. I'm sure Eric will look forward to your presentation, and I need to catch it as well, mate, because I'm sure it'll be good. You'll make me feel bad, though, for not being a Morse code operator, but I can live with that.
Well, actually, I'm not talking about Morse code. I'm going to be talking about teaching online classes.
All right. Well, that's good. I should learn about that because I've taught classes but not taught them online. So that's a good one. Okay, well, what have I been up to? Well, not a tremendous amount. My operating at the moment seems to be mainly VHF, UHF. I've done quite a few QSOs through various repeaters in the south of England. Did speak to an English guy on Hawaii the other day. He was coming into a repeater using Echolink. That was interesting. Interesting gentleman. I spent some time last weekend on 4 meters, a band we have in the UK. I don't believe you have that in the States, but I was on 4 meters for quite a while. And the beauty of 4 meters is you don't get hundreds of people on 4 meters, but when you do, they want to chat, and you get some very interesting conversations. So if you like rag chewing, 4 meters is a very good band in the UK. I been starting to clear out some of the stuff that I probably got too much of, and we've all got too much stuff. We're amateurs, we hoard. But there's a young lad at work who wants to go into engineering on the railway, and he's got quite an electrical background. He's a very, very, very intelligent lad, and if they don't take him on the engineering apprentice course, then they want looking at. But I found some pieces of test gear that I was never going to use. A really good multimeter, both digital and analog, I gave him. I also gave him an insulation tester, like a mega type installation tester, and he's gone away absolutely over the moon. And what it means is, yeah, I might have got a few quid from at a rally, but in fairness, this is going to do this young lad far more good than, you know, a few quid in my pocket. And in fairness, yeah, I would suggest, guys, you know, if you've got stuff and you've finished with it, you've had enough, you're never going to use it again. Look at the value of it and think, am I going to sell it, or can I pass it on to somebody else in the hobby, and would they get some enjoyment out of it? And I think if that's another way of moving stuff on, and just generally, you know, working together. I finished a book the other day. It wasn't ham radio related. A very interesting book on Bletchley Park and the code breakers called Station X. Now, I don't suggest any of you read it unless you're really interested in history and you really want to know about Bletchley Park, because Alan Turing and what he did covers about 2 pages of this book. The rest of it is all about Bletchley Park, how it was set up, the different enigmas, emails from or quotes from people who worked there at Bletchley Park, and how it was set up and how secret it was and all things like that. It's a very, very hard read, in my opinion. I got into it and I wanted to finish it, but there were many times I looked at the book and thought, yeah, do you know what, I've had enough. I don't think I'm going to read any more of this. It's only, 181 pages, but if you're really interested in Bletchley Park, that's quite an interesting book. It's called Station X, The Code Breakers of Bletchley Park, and it's by a gentleman called Michael Smith. But as I say, you've really got to want to know the history. And last but least, I managed to get the spare backup repeater over to Martin Ruffell, IMSA SGL, who is going to get it programmed up. I got given a VHF repeater that's better than our backup repeater. So as a backup repeater, this one would be very useful. So that's going to be set up. And next time we get on the roof of the hospital, we'll slip it in under our fusion repeater, just in case we have to do a swap at any time for any reason. But it's like everything. Once you've got your backup, your belts and braces, things never go wrong. Hi. So that's all I've been up to. But I think we've all done a fair bit of radio, guys. So that's a good one. Right. I'd like to thank the pair of you for joining me tonight. I know we're a bit short on the ground, but I think we covered it off really good. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU.
Well, my pleasure.
Pleasure to have you, Dan, and I think we covered quite a lot tonight. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
Thank you for having me on, Martin. It's been good fun.
It always is, mate. Okay, well, I say 73 to the pair of you, and we'll continue on with the podcast. 73.
7-3.
7-3.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. Start off with a request here from our colleague Steve Hartley, Golf Zero, Foxtrot Uniform Whiskey, to let everybody know about a distance learning course for the UK full exam. It's been delivered by the Bath-based distance learning team, who have currently helped nearly 800 students to pass the advanced exam over the previous syllabus, and they're reworking their training material for the new syllabus and structure, and they'll be running a course from March to June this year to get students through the first batch of the new full license course. Each student will need to provide their own RSGB full license textbook and arrange their own exam at the end of the course, and it seems exams will likely to be online with remote invigilation. There'll be no charge for the training, but applicants will need to work through a pre-course classroom and quiz to be eligible for a place. If the course is oversubscribed, places will be allocated at random for those successfully completing the pre-course work. So we're going to pop all the information of how to contact Steve and his team on the ICQ podcast webpage. You need to apply by the 17th of February, so get those applications in if you wish to progress to your full license. Andy Wybrow, Mike Zero India Romeo Uniform, has asked us to give a mention to a new amateur radio network that's been implemented by John Rivers, Golf Zero, Golf Charlie Quebec, and himself, Andy, Mike Zero, India Romeo Uniform. It's a new collaboration to create a network to share ideas, engage, and discuss all amateur radio topics on various social media platforms. They're going to be using Facebook Live under the handle Amateur Radio Network, and have a website, arn.world, and that's Alpha Romeo November.world. And as I say, they're going to get things working there. They're also looking at getting some good speakers in via Zoom, etc. They're originally looking at getting some people involved. They've got people who already mentioned SDR Player getting involved, DX Engineering, amongst others along the line. They're also looking at getting CCOM antennas, Bengali, and Yesu as well, along those lines as well. So, Andy, good luck there with your venture. And as I say, everyone check that out, and we'll put that information again on the ICQ podcast webpage. The Intrepid-DX group are seeking nominations for individuals to group that displayed their intrepid spirit in 2020. So they're looking to give an award for bold, courageous, dedicated, innovative, fearless, generous, resolute, and visionary in their approach to amateur radio. So you've only got a couple of weeks to get submissions submitted for this, as nominations will close on the 15th of February, and it will be presented in May. Right, now we head over to our features episode, where we're going to find all about this March's QSO Today Expo. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Well, everybody, welcome to this episode's feature, and it's a pleasure to be joined by Eric for Zulu 1 Uniform Golf, and also Whiskey Alpha 6 India Golf Romeo. Many of you will know Eric from the QSO Today show, which is a weekly show which you can download on amateur radio. But we're very excited that Eric has pulled together his second QSO Today Expo for us amateurs to fill the void as we're feeling the loss of hamvention, ham staycation, etc. So Eric, welcome to the ICQ podcast, and many thanks, as I say, for arranging this wonderful exhibition in March the 13th and 14th that weekend. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome, Colin. I appreciate your inviting me on.
So what I really wanted to find out, Eric, and I'm sure our listeners will be really interested to know as well, is obviously what's going to be going on at the expo, and why they should be coming along. I mean, this is really is. I mean, and anyone who didn't attend the first exhibition, this really is a great opportunity to have, I suppose, that wonderful exhibition experience in the digital world, because we've got vendors, we've got speakers, etc. across the board, and you've got some big names taking stands at the event, haven't you?
We do indeed. Flex Radio is a platinum sponsor. Elecraft, RFinder, and Connect Systems are gold sponsors, and then we have sponsors underneath that. Well, actually, maybe they're just exhibitors, but whatever they do, they're helping out. So, yeah, we look like we're going to have quite an exhibition hall, and then we have over 60 speakers in our auditorium. So, and we're looking forward to them as well. Carol Perry will bring back her youth. And I've already seen some of the videos, and they're great. So that'll also be a very interesting event.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's touch on the speakers. I mean, we really are looking at speakers really across the spectrum. Sort of things that people who are used to going to, as I say, Dayton, Hamvention, or say Friedrichshafen, etc., they'll be used to. I know AMSAT released their list of speakers just recently. But something for everybody, Morse code, learning how to get your ham ticket, etc. across the board. There really is a great flavour of speakers already lined up. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, and some of the feedback that we got from the first expo, and we did a lot of surveys. I think we got over 6,000 surveys back on the last expo. And one of the things we heard was that we wanted that some of the people wanted more expert content. And some people wanted, maybe a more basic track. So when you do an expo like this, you kind of put a call for speakers, and you get replies, and then they tell you what they want to talk about, and you make a program from what you get. And that's kind of what we've done. But we've had a great response from speakers, and so I think we've got the full gamut. And then AMSAT got involved, and not only are they going to be a booth at the exhibition hall, but they have 9 speakers of their own. So we've put together a whole auditorium and track for them so that they can present all of their beginning to expert content. So we're looking really forward to that. And then I also like what was interesting, the most looked at content last time besides the keynote speech was the history of Heathkit. So I like to have some of the history speakers presentations in the track as well, and so we have a few of those, and those should be quite interesting.
Yeah. Now, for anyone who didn't attend the first exhibition, is coming to the first one there in March. What can they expect to get when they go to one of these virtual speakers events? Is it just a case of watching someone do the presentation, or is there a way of interacting with the speaker and with the other attendees in the hall?
Oh, that's very interesting. In the last expo, what we did was we actually were playing YouTube feeds, into the auditorium, and then we'd have to have everybody move off into a Zoom webinar room. So we had 4 simultaneous Zoom webinar rooms running for Q&A in each of the 4 tracks. What we have now is we're using a platform that's integrated with the other platform, the vFairs platform. This platform is called AirMeet Summit. And what we have is we have a 10-theater multiplex. And what we can do is we can, all of the presentations are recorded in advance. And we do that because it's very possible that one of our speakers lives in an area where his internet is not great, or all of his kids are home for the weekend and they're watching movies and it wipes out his internet. So we get all of the presentations in advance. But in the new AirMeet Summit platform, the speaker is backstage. And as soon as his presentation is finished, then he will come on live. You'll see him like a Zoom meeting. And we have the ability to take questions either through chat, or we can even promote audience members to the stage so that they're up on the stage along with them. There is a way to, clap, so essentially it looks like, bubbling hands coming up through the screen if people, if people clap and the presenter can see that. So there's feedback to the presenter. And I think it's going to be a much better, seamless user experience than what we did last time. And that was really, I spent the month of September looking for a way to integrate this whole thing so that we wouldn't have to move the audience and that it was kind of all together.
So in essence, the only difference then between being at a physical event and this wonderful virtual event is just the fact you're just not physically in the room. You've got everything there. You've got the interaction with the presenter, the response, the things going on, and then that's a great opportunity to, I suppose, not only talk to the speaker but other people in the room as well. So it's a great opportunity to exchange ideas on the topics that you're running.
It is indeed. Well, one of the things I joke about with the speakers when I speak to them, I say, I went to my first date in Hamvention was in Xenia, when the first year that they opened in Xenia. And I went to one of the presentations and I sat right in the middle of the room, right in front of the speaker. And he started and I realized I was in the wrong place. Now, I wanted to be polite, so I didn't get up and leave. But one of the things you can do on a virtual event is you can take your mouse and you can click to another auditorium. So one of the things I advise our speakers is that, this is an electronic medium where people can easily change the channel. So we want to be able to hook them right away, meaning that we offer the meat and substance at the very beginning, so that and then we reinforce it. We try to talk like TED and try to do it in 20, 25 minutes and then take Q&A. So this is the formula that we're using so that we don't have people clicking and moving off the platform. The other thing is that for the more advanced technical discussions, those will be longer, but the people that will go to those are people that actually want to see all the slides and want to go in deep. But one of the things I hope from the way that this presentations will work is that on the platform will also be any collateral that the presenter wants to share, like white papers or links or things like that, and so that therefore the purpose of the presentation is to interest the viewer in the subject that they're presenting and have them follow up and learn after that. So the idea isn't to give them everything in the presentation, but it's to kindle an interest, to kind of spark, a new interest in a new part of the hobby.
Yeah, certainly so. Now, I suppose the next question is then on that is, I normally catch up with my friend Bob when I go to a Hamfest and we sit down and have a cup of coffee. Is there any way of catching up with our fellow friendly hams at the events, say in this digital world?
Well, that's so the AirMeet Summit platform that we're using is it's capable of handling up to 100,000 viewers, and so what you'll see on the right side of the screen is you'll see this big column of little icons about. It depends on the size of your screen. I recommend, try to use as big a screen as you can so that you just have a sense of kind of taking it all in. But all of the users on the platform will be in a column, and you can search for them at the top. So you can search by their name or call sign, and you'll see their icon will come up, and then you can click on it and you can send them a text message and you say, go to table 8. And if they go down to table 8, then they can take a chair, and now they're in a video conference with the people around the table. So I probably will mostly have tables of 8, but I probably will have tables of 4 and tables of 6 too, as a way for people to feel comfortable taking a chair at a table without maybe thinking that they're going to be joined by 7 other people.
Yeah, and certainly I certainly would concur that some of the best conversations you have at a Hamfest are those ones that you just bump into people on a table and just start chatting, and there's some of the most wonderful conversations you can have with people, and they spark off some wonderful ideas, don't they?
No, I was just going to say, I thought Colin was going to tell you about when we do the National Hamfest in the UK. The hall is not massive, but it can take me an hour to get from one end of the hall to the other and back again, just by talking to people. And I know it annoys Colin and the rest of the crew sometimes, and they're saying to me, pointing at the watch, saying, we got an interview to do. But I think the social interaction is good. And if we can have these tables where you can sit down and talk to people, and, some people won't have heard of us. Some people will have really interesting stories to tell. And I remember sitting down with an old gentleman who was well in his 80s at the UK National Hamfest. And I spent ages with this guy. chatting to him, and he was telling me all sorts of things that literally blew me away. And then later on in the day, he really wanted to do something, and I happened to know the person that was doing it and managed to get him sort of almost at the front. But it's a two-way thing. We're all interested in the hobby, and the social interaction is very, very important. So I kind of like what you're doing with the tables, Eric.
Well, there's an addition, Martin, we also have a speed networking area. It's at the top of the screen. So if you click on that, then you kind of are thrown into a pool with everybody else who's in the pool, and it will kind of match you up with random strangers, and you'll have a 5-minute conversation before. So I guess it's like speed dating, but it's a way to kind of meet people randomly and say hi. And if you don't have anything in common with them and you don't want to talk anymore, you can, move on to the next one, or you can leave that and, go join a table, or you don't have to join a table at all. In fact, one of the great things that we found about this platform is that when we start a presentation, you don't even have to go into a presentation. So since the presentations will be available after the event for 30 days, and then they'll find their way to our YouTube site. If you don't go to a presentation live, you can always catch it later, and you can spend all your time at the lounge in the tables or in the speed networking. So there's a lot of opportunity to virtually visit with people you don't know and people you do know. One of the things I did before we signed the contract for this platform is I went to a bunch of random events that AirMeet has at the bottom of their website. So I would just go. It didn't matter what it was about, and I'd go and I'd sit at a table, and then I would be joined by people that would come in and sit at the table. So I met a lot of interesting people, around the world talking about various things, and so I kind of really became a believer in this platform just from using it myself. So I think it's going to be a great experience.
Yeah. Now, Eric, this is happening on March the 13th and 14th. What's the time period? How long will each day actually be? Because you will also have people from all over the world, I assume, dialing into this. I mean, we're between 5 and 8 hours behind the States here. In front of the States, rather. What's the time period you're going to do this over?
Okay, so to be honest with you, Martin, this event is targeted at North America, or it's targeted at the American time zones, and the reason was from the data that we collected off the platform and the surveys that we did, 90%, more than 90% of the people that came to the last expo were from North America. I thought I would try to make it an international event again because we have the platform for 48 hours. So I sent out messages to the various amateur radio groups around the world and to speakers around the world, and I didn't get any responses back except from American clubs and groups and stuff. So at this point, it's targeted on North America. It starts Pacific time at 6 p.m. Pacific time on March 12th, and it runs for 48 hours until 6 p.m. Pacific time, March 14th. And remember, that's the weekend in America that they go to daylight savings time. So it makes it a little bit complicated. And then the speakers actually start at 8 a.m. Pacific time on Saturday morning and Sunday morning. We're hoping that the vendors who have their own lounges will have activities in their lounges, that evening. The keynote speaker will be midday Saturday, in the middle of the day, so it won't be as before, on Friday evening. And I think that's kind of how it's going to work, and we'll see how that works. And we'll take data from that show, and when we do it again in August, we'll know exactly what we did wrong or what we did right.
Yeah, well, it's understandable that you would do it for the US market because they are the biggest bunch of English-speaking hams, I would suggest, to you. So it does make sense. The time period was just me asking because obviously we're going to take part and support you on this, and I obviously want people in Europe to know. So we'll work out the UTC timings nearer the time, and we'll put it out for Europe as well for you to let people know what's happening there.
Well, thank you. Well, I myself, you should know, is I won't be able to attend the expo until about 10:30 Pacific time in the morning Saturday. So I kind of will be off the platform myself, as will most of our staff here in Israel, until it's about 7:30, 8 o'clock our time here. So fortunately, we have other staff in other parts of the world that can take it for us, but we'll miss a good part of it at the beginning.
Right. Just one other question from my point of view, and then I'll keep quiet and let Colin have his say. The vendors you have, will they be doing special offers at the show to get your listeners in to take a part on this?
Well, I certainly hope so.
Or do you know?
I know. I certainly hope so. But the last time we did a game called the Leaderboard, and I was no match for the brilliance of the people that gamed our system. I even asked one of the high scorers who I disqualified, but I asked him anyway how he did it, and he had multiple computers running, and he was scraping the HTML code looking for, the hooks that he needed and triggers to be able to set a flag, and I was no match for those people. And as a result of that, I spent the month of August trying to just get myself out of the leaderboard and the whole prize issue. I was able to with the help of the vendors, work that out. So what we've done this time is that every vendor is responsible for their own contest, which means that you're going to have to go to each vendor booth if you want to enter, and if they have prizes, that's up to them. I hope they do, and I hope that their contest will be however they want to run the contest. So I'm not in the contest business anymore. We have a prize page that we'll put up once we know what the prizes are, but at this point, we are not doing, as an event, we are not doing prizes.
No problems. Something I thought of here, sometimes because I have to fly to a lot of the big ham fests, I get what I call brown box envy when I see these big boxes of radios being carried out of the hall, realizing I'll never get those back in my hand luggage on the plane coming home. So how does that work in a virtual event? How do I spend my hard-earned dollars on a nice new rig?
Well, you know what? You can bring camels to water, but you can't make them drink. So I'm saying this as a preamble. We are providing every possible tool we can to facilitate sales. So if you look at our exhibitor page, we've signed an agreement with a company called Compunetics. They are a company that builds an inbound web RTC call center. In English, what that means is that when you click on the button, it opens a video conference between you and a salesperson who could take your order. We've offered this. We bought 100 seats of Compunetics call center at our expense, and we are offering these seats free of charge to any of the distributors that want to take orders on the weekend for their vendors that are on the floor. So we're creating this buy now experience, which means that if you push the buy now button on a booth that is agreed that they want to take sales, then it will go to somebody that can take the order and ship the order. So maybe you'll have it by Monday or Tuesday after the event. So that's kind of how it works. So we're doing everything we can to facilitate sales. We just need the distributors who could take the orders to step up to the plate and be willing to take the orders.
So then, as a design suggestion for you, then need to get a little avatar for the people that buy those boxes, little brown box above the head, so I can look envious at their avatars walking around with they.
Well, that's a very good. That's a very good idea. Maybe we should, and maybe that's possible. Is actually to put a, to give them some space that says 7300 or something like that under them. So when you mouse over their avatar, you can see all the stuff they've purchased at the expo.
Yeah, and then my face will turn green with everything. That's something for them.
Yeah, no, this is why it's easier for me on a virtual expo. I'm a compulsive buyer on Amazon anyway, So if you make it easy, it's possible for me to push the button. But at live events, I'm even worse. So
Yeah.
I have to be careful.
Exactly. So, guys, make sure you budget accordingly, as they
That's
say.
right.
As they say. So obviously we've got the big guys there, like Ellie-Craft and Flex Radio. What about smaller interest groups and national bodies, people like ARRL, etc.? Would they?
Well, by the way, we are an ARRL partner this year or this time. Last time we were ARRL sanctioned. We're an ARRL partner. Our keynote speaker will be the new CEO of the ARRL, and I think that there's a lot of good relationships that we're having with them. We like working with them. They're a great staff. Of course, we have AMSET. We have CW Ops on the platform. Of course, we have all the podcasters on the platform. And we've got some, fine vendors. We've got Bigali Keys, for example. I just had a conversation with Bruna today. Lovely lady and great company. So there's a lot of people in the exhibit hall that we like, and hopefully our people that attend will like them too.
Exactly.
Well, if you've got Bigali Keys, then we might have lost Dan Romanchik for a little while. I know he's doing a talk for you as well.
Exactly. That'd be where you'll find Dan. He won't be on our stand. He'll be there looking at the keys. So definitely.
Well, we have to figure out how to make the and maybe for something like a Bigali key, you actually have to have your hands around it, right, in order to really feel the experience. But maybe testimonials from Dan or something like that would help to make that experience a little bit better. But that's you're right. That's a very tactile thing. We haven't figured out how to do that virtually.
Right, so I suppose we need to do the important stuff here now. So I'm getting this right. You can access the exhibition on desktop, laptop, tablet. You just need a web browser, I take it, just to get involved. Would that be correct?
Well, okay. So because we've gone to the AirMeet platform for this virtual event, here's what we're suggesting. We're suggesting laptop or desktop or large tablet, Chrome browser. It's all there's no downloads for either. There's no drivers or anything like that you have to load. But for the best experience, it's good to have a big screen. I can see this. I've got hanging above my two screens. I actually have a screen up above that's sitting right now in one of my AirMeet platforms, and I can see 8 tables on a 24-inch screen. If I was squeezing that down, it would start, turning into columns of 2 or columns of 1, a column of 1. So I think that people are going to enjoy this much more with as large a screen as they have. And the fact is that I received some calls during the event that people were complaining that it just wasn't working for them. Mm-hmm. And when I asked them where they were, they said, well, I'm in a campground in Wyoming. And I said, on Wi-Fi. I said, well, I'm afraid that may not be a good place. So for this event, having as the best bandwidth you can have is important. Wi-Fi on a congested network may not be great. Even AirMeet suggests being on at least a 10 mega downstream connection. Now it does have a low data speed mode. So it's still usable, but I think that for the best enjoyment, the biggest screen possible and being on a good internet connection is important.
Yep. So I'm suggesting I'm booking the big screen TV in the front room. I'm switching off the Wi-Fi and plugging a cable straight into the router so nobody can play Call of Duty or anything that weekend. So I'm going to enjoy this on a massive panel. And say, just to let everyone know again, 13th and 14th of March. And not only that as well, but access to all the speakers and the videos for how many days afterwards, Eric?
So the speakers will start on, I think we'll have most of the speakers on Saturday. We'll have the rest of the speakers on Sunday. I have to tell you, Colin and Martin, this is a very interesting thing. What we noticed on the platform, I have a dashboard on the platform last time, and I'm sitting there in the middle of Sunday, and I'm seeing the attendance wind down, just like it winds down at Dayton. So you start to see like it's getting to be noon, and you're seeing like this curve. All of a sudden, it's starting to go down. Like people have their rolling bags, and they're kind of going through the lobby, and they're headed to the airport. And that's what happened last time. And I thought, isn't that interesting that that somehow it would wind down like that when it was quite available for the rest of the day. So that's so we know that, and that's kind of how we'll schedule things so that it will allow people to head to the airport.
Are you sure that the XYL or the station manager hasn't told them if they're not home by a certain time, the dinner's in the dog?
It's very possible that the XYL said, there's a family barbecue this afternoon, and you better be there, So that may be how it worked for a lot of people. And so we're prepared for that. And we thought that was, very interesting to watch that happen. That's one of the great things about a virtual event is you have this, big dashboard where you can actually see, what's happening with the activity on the platform.
No problems. Now, we've got some on-demand availability as well after the show. How long would that be available for?
So we'll have the on the vFairs platform. Now, by the way, all these platforms are integrated. I actually hired a computer programmer, a very excellent guy, and so he's integrating all of the platforms together. So everyone will have their kind of virtual pass, and they'll get that in an email, and that will allow them to move from platform to platform. But in the 30-day on-demand period, then all of the presentations will be on the vFairs platform for playing. So just like before, you'll be able to go into the auditorium and bring them down.
Fantastic. So all that's left to do is to ask everyone listening to head along to the QSO Today HamExpo.com website and get your ticket for the event. And not only can you see many fine speakers and exhibitors, but the ICQ Amateur Radio podcast will also be in attendance for this show. So feel free to pop along and say hello to us too while you're there. And I say, we'll hopefully work to make this one an even bigger success than the last show, Eric. So I wish you all the best with the event, 13th, 14th of March. And let's make this one an even better one than the first one.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And by the way, your listeners should go to your website where our banners are proudly flying, and then they don't have to remember what the URL is for the Ham Expo. You've been kind enough to actually make it available for them to get there.
Exactly. And now I have to remember my own website address, I don't, so it's icqpodcast.com. Eric, many thanks for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. And as I say, it's great. I hope you have a wonderful event. And as I say, certainly look forward to catch up with you on the 13th, 14th of March. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on one of my favorite podcasts.
Thank you very much. 73 is Eric.
73.
73, Eric.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, everybody, I really hope that you enjoyed our conversation with Eric from the QSO Today Expo. As I say, and we'd obviously invite you all to check out the banners on the ICQ Podcast website, which get you across to the expo, where you can join us and all the other hams from around the world for an online expo on the 13th and 14th of March. Now, we've got some feedback, Dad, from our previous episodes, which is always great to hear from people. Dan Montague, Kilo Oscar 4, Echo Uniform Hotel, drops the line and says, in the last episode, Improving Your Handy Talkie in the News Roundtable, we made reference to Stagner 4285. And so we're a little bit stumped by this. Now, thankfully, Dan's done the research for us. And in NATO, it's a standardization agreement, the term Stagner, which defines processes, procedures, terms, and conditions for common military and technical procedures or equipment between member countries of the alliance. So Stagner 4285 characterizes 1200, 1400, and 3600 bits single tone modems for HF radio links. And he points us all to check out a link on Wikipedia, which I'll put on the the news notes for this episode, so you can check out this link and find out more information about it. So Dan, thanks a lot for passing on that information for us, and you can check out this episode 343's link on the ICQ Podcast webpage, where we'll put that link there for you. Now on the YouTube channel, we got some feedback on your feature, Dan, on improving your handy talkie from a user called Vagrantus. Apologies if I've mispronounced it. And his thoughts of enjoying, your handy talkie a bit more was to use an aftermarket antenna, use a tiger tail. This really helps with VHF. Seriously, try it with proper length of wire, you'll see. Talk across the microphone. No one wants to hear pops, whistles, sisses when someone talks. Keep your antenna vertical when others are vertical as well. If the signal is poor for either transmission or receiving, take a step or two in any direction. You may change from a weak signal to full quieting. And do not cover the tiny microphone hole with your finger. I think that last one is a very good one to remember, because that's very easily done, isn't it, Dad? So some interesting talks there from our friend there on YouTube.
Yeah, certainly is. And the last one, don't cover the microphone with your finger. When I was working as a radio engineer for a radio company a good few years back, a lot of radios used to come back from building sites, and they used to say, I can't, this one's not transmitting, or this one, I can't hear anything on this one. And you'd look at the case and you'd see the radio been dropped in concrete, and the little hole in front of the microphone insert was absolutely full of concrete. You had to dig it out. So that's, I've actually seen that. And the tiger tail, I think what he's talking about there is what I suggested is the little counterpoise. You make a counterpoise for your radio, and it, as I said in the feature, I've gone from pretty much just about being able to get into a repeater to absolutely end stop by putting the counterpoise on. And I couldn't, I know the theory, but I couldn't believe just how well it worked. So it doesn't look pretty, but if you want to improve your distance, it's certainly one that would certainly help. And I agree with everything else you said, Colin.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, we heard from Stuart Dixon at the start of the show, Mike Severed, Bravo Hotel Tango, who kindly set up a monthly donation to the ICQ podcast. He's got a question for you, Dad. He's saying, how are you getting on with the FT70D? He's also just got one. It's a great little radio, and he's using his with a homemade ladder line J-pole for 2 meters when he does SOTA operations. So, how are you finding yours? What's your latest update on that radio you got around Christmas time?
Yeah, the Yaesu FT70D, which your mum bought me for Christmas. When I got one that was working, and you always get the odd DOA, dead on arrival, but nothing against Yaesu on that one. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've used it a lot. It's interestingly via a hotspot at home. Last couple of weeks, I've had it connected to CQ UK, and I was talking to people that were in the hobby back in the 60s and 70s, and early 80s, and saying this must have been what it was like on 2 meters. There's just wall-to-wall contacts. There's somebody on in a QSO pretty much all the time. Now, all right, you can still transmit and get in and have a chat with them, but there's some phenomenal amount of traffic going through. So, love it. It's got great audio. It's a good feel to the radio. I'm very, very impressed with mine. There's only one minor that I would have improved. And if anybody ever brings out an aftermarket battery, the battery life is not as good as some of the other radios I've got. That's the only criticism, but it's certainly more than useful to get a good operating session. So, if you're out SOTA, don't be put off by that. But as I say, a brilliant little radio, and a cost-effective radio for getting on Fusion.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for your update there, Dad. Right, well, we've got some lovely thanks to do on the donation fronts. All UK-based this episode. Sid Boyce, G3, Victor, Bravo Victor, Andrew Wybrow, Mike Zero, India Romeo uniform, and as mentioned, Stuart Dixon, Mike 7 Bravo Hotel Tango. Many thanks for supporting us this episode. You can show your value in what you've heard in the show today and help us out and keep us advert free by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. Well, as I say, whatever value you find in our show is greatly appreciated if you can sign up for one of the subscription donors or a one-off donation. I say they're very supportive to the work we do, and we really do appreciate it. We'd like to thank Eric for Z1 Uniform Golf, who joined us to tell us about the QSO Today Expo that's taking place on the 13th and 14th of March. As I say, the ICQ podcast will have a virtual booth at that event. So, not only can you enjoy many great speakers, but you can pop along and see us as well. We're still trying to get a head around exactly what interactions we can do on that there. But Eric, as you probably heard in his feature, was telling us there's a lot of interaction you can have with people that you want to at the show. So we'll try and get as many presenters as possible available for that event. We'd like to thank Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf for joining us on the News Roundtable. As say with you there, Dad. Apologies for our colleagues who couldn't make it this episode. Work and studies, etc., getting in the way. But I say I'm sure they made your brain think about the topics that are going on in our wonderful hobby, as I say this episode. Right, well, I think that just wraps up all the bits and pieces from our side of things. All that's left to do is to find Mrs. B a lovely treat and a cup of tea, and I'm sure you'll sit down and spend a bit of time over this weekend.
Certainly will, Colin. We'll go and find Mrs. B a cup of tea in a minute, and we'll see what treat we can find her. But what I am actually missing is, while we're in lockdown, Mrs. B and I used to go for breakfast, and we'd use it as a treat. Once a month we'd go for breakfast, and at the moment we can't do that. So we'll maybe have to do something different tomorrow. But all in all, we're going to sit down and enjoy today. And there you go, Colin. Yeah, Mum and I are going to have a relaxing weekend.
Wonderful. We'll enjoy, won't you? Right, guys, I'm going to bid you all 73s. And we're going to catch up again all in a fortnight's time. 73's all.
Yeah, 73.